今から浮きます。
Today, I am going to be the bearer of bad news. Yippee, we love that. Partially, there is an upside, however. So even though it may seem rather gloomy and a little bit sad and kind of like a goodbye, there is a brighter future, and a healthier one, matter of fact. Before anything, I want to say thank you for all the support on the recent videos. I very much appreciate it, a lot. I've changed the editing completely. I know a lot of people don't like it, but it feels a lot more rewarding to watch, a lot more enjoyable, and while it takes more time to do, I have a lot more fun doing it. It doesn't feel as monotonous. I enjoy making videos. I hope to continue kind of expanding outwards, talking about different things with this style of editing because it's a bit more entertaining, yada yada, etc, etc. Thank you. I appreciate you wholeheartedly. I wouldn't be here without you. I love you. So I'm going to drop this straight on you. Tatsuki Fujimoto, the author of Fire Punch and Chainsaw Man, does not want to do Chainsaw Man anymore. Hell, he doesn't even really want to draw anymore. He wants to completely step away from the manga industry in an artistry sense. Might bring up some red flags, some big alarms. Oh my god, like what's going to happen? Don't worry, I got you. Fujimoto has been on a roll for many years now and still relatively young to the industry. Chainsaw Man is a worldwide phenomenon, very successful, very entertaining, very enjoyable. Fire Punch was also very entertaining but not as critically acclaimed. But it isn't his only body of work. Having Look Back, Goodbye Eri, and now a lot of his previous one-shots being published, there is a massive range on offer in regards to Fujimoto's works. He's versatile. He's not a one-trick pony. He's able to craft and create stories in whatever way he deems fit, and they're very entertaining. All of them are very much enjoyable within their own right. But I think the manga industry is very volatile. It's very toxic, especially for weekly stories. So when I hear that Fujimoto doesn't really want to do manga anymore, or at least he doesn't want to draw manga anymore, I couldn't agree more with him. Leave a like and subscribe or I'm gonna... I couldn't also help but feel a little bit sorry because there's so much that goes into that weekly experience. I can only imagine how tiring it is, how repetitive, how limiting, how sometimes even self-destructive it can truly be. It seems to me that the weekly experience from Chainsaw Man has really affected him, and it's kind of spiraled into how he perceives Chainsaw Man Part 2, but also future works and future endeavors. So he's very fascinated with this idea of completely stopping to draw Chainsaw Man, potentially even stuff after it, and just write the story. That's all he wants to do. He just wants to write it and have someone else do the artwork. This is a common thing. There's a lot of authors that do it. He even cites an inspiration of Aka Akasaka, who previously done Kaguya-sama, but also writes the story for Oshi no Ko, doesn't draw it. He wants to do that. Deep down, I think a lot of us want what's best for him. If he wants to continue creating stories, this is most likely the way he's going to go. Does that mean he's going to drop Chainsaw Man entirely? It's honestly hard to tell. I don't think so, but this may drastically decrease the length that you may originally expected. I don't see Chainsaw Man Part 2 going past 150 odd chapters, 200, 300 chapters, like some of the biggest stories that you can think of out right now. That is a dedication, a grind, a completely different type of mindset, and it's once again volatile. That weekly experience is a monster in itself. Just going off what Fujimoto tends to enjoy writing in terms of length, you could probably expect Part 2 to be less than 100 chapters, or around that number. Now that may be sad to hear, but if there was ever more opportunity to continue Chainsaw Man, or even other stories that he wants to do within the universe or outside of it, if he's able to write the story and get someone else to draw it, he has full flexibility, full freedom to do what he wants. Funny enough, he also mentions that it's not just the weekly experience, but also time management, money management, assistant management, and the freedom to be able to create. He wishes that he could actually draw the background within his artwork a lot more. So when you see certain panels, certain things being done within Chainsaw Man Part 2 that may look a little bit off or not as detailed, it's because he doesn't have the time to do it. From our knowledge and from this interview, he says that he hasn't had assistance since Look Back, which was like 2-3 odd years ago. And Chainsaw Man Part 2 is partially weekly. He has a little bit of flexibility, sometimes it's bi-weekly, basically, and that freedom has allowed him to explore that creativity a little bit more and comfortably. I didn't know that. You probably didn't know that. Assistants basically make or break the weekly experience. There's not a lot of authors that are writing weekly stories without assistants. You need them. They're vital. They are kind of the key process of continuously writing a weekly story with all of the detailed artwork that you're putting into it. Now, luckily enough for Fujimoto, he's very successful and rather well off because of the success of his stories, but when it comes to new authors, which is what he points out, it's very much unmanageable. A lot of new authors don't get that freedom, that flexibility, because they just don't have the money to pursue assistants to help them. So it's a grind, and a harsh one at that. Okay, so Fujimoto doesn't want to draw, but he may continue to write maybe Chainsaw Man Part 3 if he wants to do it with someone else taking over. I'd be okay with that. Or he may want to write and draw something separate like a one-shot, a singular story that he can kind of publish whenever he wants. Currently, he's one of the only authors to be able to create such magnificent short stories and have them be critically acclaimed across the globe. Very much impressive. He may want to do that again, so he could balance a weekly story, maybe even monthly, bi-weekly, with someone else drawing it while he does his own thing with a short story. It doesn't seem like he wants to quit drawing entirely, but more so just have the freedom to do it comfortably, to live up to his own artistic values, because he has a lot of respect for himself when it comes to that. Now, there is also another option here. I don't know how clear of an option it could be, but it may be something that he could be interested in or maybe even looking towards already. There is ever so slowly becoming a trend of successful manga authors going their own path, still creating manga but at a pace that is entirely up to them. The one example I can give is Sue Yoshida with Chojin X. That story releases whenever that chapter is ready, whenever Sue Yoshida wants to do it. And while it may be a little bit redundant in terms of success or sales, I think the long-term effect on the author's health and their creativity is so much more vital. It pays off much more in the long run rather than this quick buck that studios and companies are trying to make off their authors. Put it like this, Chojin X is successful. It's going to sell regardless based on Sue Yoshida's name. Now you imagine if you gave it an anime, bolstering that reputation even more, bringing more attention towards it, and you have an even more successful story that is completely different to the quote-unquote Hollywood manga-esque version of what's going on with Weekly Shonen Jump. Not only is the author healthier, but they're able to create a story from their vision. They're not rushed, they're not pressured, they can just create what they want. This may sound weird, but if you haven't read Chojin X, I highly recommend you do because it doesn't feel like a normal manga. Not to say that it's revolutionary with the story that it's telling, but more so pacing, the artistry, the approach towards the story in itself is incredibly different, and it's because of that newfound freedom. If there was ever an author to potentially want to do what Sue Yoshida and Chojin X is doing, I could see it being Tatsuki Fujimoto. It may not be towards a long story, it may just be for his short stories. He may just want to write and draw completed works that he can ship out whenever he wants, because from what we've experienced already, they're very successful and very enjoyable. And while all of us being Fire Punch and Chainsaw Man fans are going to be a little bit disappointed because you get no more Chainsaw Man or no more new serialized weekly story, sometimes it's for the best. Even if it does potentially go to a part 3 with a completely different artist, I would much rather Fujimoto create the story he wants to tell at a rate that's healthy and comfortable with. I do believe the moral of this video, however, is that the manga industry, at least in the weekly part of it, is very full on. It's all in or all out. You're struggling. You have to write a story that fits within these requirements and adds this and puts this in there and has that, and it's just so much for not only new authors to handle but old ones as well. Ones that are already established and successful get burnt out and tired, and it unfortunately reflects in their story. The last thing you want is an author that's 300, 400, 500 chapters deep after so many years to become burnt out from this weekly experience because it reflects in their story. It becomes unenjoyable. Not to mention the amount of health complications, that's an obvious one, and just overloading with stress. If Fujimoto has an opportunity to create stories, create manga in a way that he wants to, whether he's drawing it or not, I think he should try and do it. I do think he will finish out part 2. It may not be as long as we originally expected because of it. Who knows? But I think he will complete it and do what he wants to do after that. I guess the other side to mention is that if you've read any of his works, it seems like a loss artistically because his vision for storytelling is very unique. It's super interesting and entertaining. Like his panel work, his artistry, it may not be the prettiest or best rendered or, anatomically correct, etc. But his vision, how he perceives characters, how he perceives emotions, the subtlety within his work is very vibrant, and it will undoubtedly be sad to see all of that go, knowing that potentially one day in the future we may never see artwork from Fujimoto again is disappointing, but you can't blame him for it. At least we still may have the stories that he's able to write, and potentially even usher in a new wave of incredible artistry to accompany it. A good way for new artists to come into the industry underneath a very reputable name. Now that sounds very interesting.